Real quick, the only ask I could ever have of you guys is to help spread the word so we can help more women lose body fat, build muscle, reach their goals, and feel insanely confident. And the only way we can do that is if you rate, review, and share this podcast. So the single thing I ask for you to do is if you could leave a review. It will take you 10 seconds. And it will mean the absolute world to me and may change the world of someone else. Like I know so many listeners, and also too, like I can resonate with this, getting a muscle spasm or getting a cramp or getting like, something along those lines after exercise, or even just midway through the day. I've heard people, their feet cramp, their calves cramp. And so, from the world of macronutrients, I'm like, oh, you need to eat a banana. Like you need to get some potassium in there. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Macro Hour. Today, we are very, very honored to have Dr. Carolyn Dean here with us, a leading expert on magnesium. I'm so excited for this podcast and just to pick her brain on all of the things that she has behind magnesium, with the wealth of knowledge and passion for this specific mineral. Dr. Dean will enlighten us on the importance of magnesium and its impact on our health and all of the good things. So everybody listening and tuning in, get ready for an eye-opening conversation that just might change the way that you view this essential mineral. Dr. Dean, Carolyn Dean, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikkiey. I'm really happy to be here because as I see it, and as I've said to you, you're the macro girl, I'm the micro girl. And I think we should get together.
Oh, I love it. Let's go. Dive on all the things. Yep. Macronutrients. But I'm excited to, again, pick your brain on this essential micronutrient. So tell us first and foremost, what is magnesium?
Magnesium, it's a mineral that is ignored, for one thing. There's 80% of the known metabolic functions of the body require magnesium. Now that's huge. That can end up being about 1,000 metabolic enzymes that have to have magnesium in order to process. We need magnesium to process our macronutrients, our protein, carbs, and fats. So why I say you're macro, I'm micro, they work together. And I think my overall theme and message today would be that we know the importance of macronutrients. I mean, when I get an injury, I recently had an elbow injury, immediately my need for protein went up. When I was in practice, vegetarians who got hepatitis had to increase their protein and go to animal protein in order to heal. So we know all that. And we also know people doing macros, they're probably taking some supplements, but they probably turned away from supplements because they didn't seem to help. So what I've been doing, because I was so magnesium deficient, I created absorbable micronutrients so that they could work along with the macros. So I've got the micronutrient picture clarified and solidified because I've been at this since I was in my late teens, and we're talking about 55 years ago. I started reading about nutrition. So magnesium came to me, as I mentioned, because I found out when I was working in Manhattan in the early 90s on an AIDS and chronic fatigue project for alternative medicine for AIDS, Random House approached me to write a book on magnesium because I'd written some small books before then. And I said, what can I do in, one mineral, 300 pages? But I immediately found out that my headaches and my neck tension and my eye twitching and my heart palpitations and leg cramps were all related to magnesium deficiency. But when I tried to take magnesium, I got the laxative effect. So after my first magnesium book got published, it's called The Magnesium Miracle, I searched for a manufacturing company that could make a non-laxative magnesium because that's that's the clue, the cue or whatever to micronutrients is they have to be absorbable. The body takes them in at a cellular level. They have to be bioavailable. Because what happened in the beginning of the supplement industry, and I was there because I was in med school in the mid 70s. In my city, Halifax, Nova Scotia, they didn't even have a health food store back then. We didn't have a naturopathic college. So what happened is as I came along, I did my medicine and then I did my naturopathic degree. The supplement industry came along. They started with food-based supplements and they worked. But then, the biochemical industry or whatever, the pharma, big pharma got a hold of this is the chemical structure of this vitamin C. Let's make it synthetic. And everything became synthetic. And I watched that happen where doctors in the various conferences I would go to, the alternative medicine conferences, they'd say, well, we tried these B vitamins, they didn't work, so we had to give them intramuscularly or intravenously, and we just kept pumping them, and then they worked. So they were using synthetics that the body didn't really appreciate. And actually, Nikki, that's where the whole supplement industry is sort of sketchy right now, because the studies sometimes say, well, vitamins don't work, or actually they're worse for you. Well, that could be because they're studying synthetic supplements, or they're not studying supplements in their groupings. For example, you can't absorb vitamin D unless you have enough magnesium, because magnesium activates vitamin D. And who knows that? So, through my 55 years of studying all this, I put together the right way of taking micronutrients so that they could work in a macronutrient environment.
Well, love that. And thank you for sharing a little bit about that and opening it up and talking about magnesium. And a little bit too, it sounds like, your background, not only in the medical field, but also just your own personal story. It sounds like you had that deficiency, you were experiencing it, that led you down this path of finding the answers and creating what you've created. So that's incredible. I believe you talk about this in your books. Talk about the top 12 reasons why magnesium is so foundational to women and even men's health and overall well-being.
Well, I think it probably starts with energy. Magnesium is necessary in a glycolysis cycle to make something called the pyruvate lactate to put in the Krebs cycle. And then the Krebs cycle needs a couple of cofactor magnesium bumps to get to the end point of ATP energy. So magnesium
in layman's
is right in
there, right? I don't mean to interrupt you, but there in layman terms, I'm like, I understand that. I get the science of all of that, but in layman terms, it's a factor for energy.
So what happens, especially when women go to the doctor and say, oh, I'm so exhausted, I can't take it anymore. Well, that's misinterpreted as, well, you're depressed or you're anxious, so let's give you a pill. Doctors aren't going to say, well, maybe you need magnesium because it's necessary for your energy. So there's your energy. And then you come to muscles and nerves. And in order for a muscle or a nerve to fire or create an action, you have to have calcium inside the cell. And the gatekeeper for letting calcium into a cell is magnesium. So the gate opens, the calcium is pushed in, and boom, it does its activity. And then the gate opens again and magnesium pulls out the calcium. If you don't have magnesium, the gate sort of stays wobbly and the cells can fill up with calcium. And in muscles create spasms and twitchings and cramps. I mean, I used to have such big Charlie horse leg cramps. I'd stretch in bed and I'd get this humongous calf cramp and have to jump out of bed and sort of stand straight and stretch it out. But muscles, what have we got? 600 muscles in the body. So any one of those muscles can be cramping. People get toe cramps and back cramps that aren't a backache or anything to do with the spine. It's just the muscle spasming. Nerves, same thing. Open up, calcium in, boom, you get your nerve action potential. And if that cell is filled up with calcium, the nerve cell just excites itself to death, they say. How many miles of nerves do we have in the body? 45. So, we'll get numbness and tingling and burning pain and itchy pains. And some people can even be misdiagnosed with something horrible like multiple sclerosis, and it could be a magnesium deficiency. So we got energy, nerves, and muscles. I mean, that covers so much. And then you'll look at the biologic processes. You've got how magnesium balances the cholesterol in the body. The HMG-CoA reductase that makes cholesterol is what statins kill. And magnesium works on that enzyme and either makes it work more or work less depending on how much cholesterol in the body. I mean, everybody now is looking at cholesterol not being the cause of heart disease, but we're still in this terrible merry-go-round of telling people if their cholesterol is even a tiny bit above normal, they have to take a statin. And then the statin drugs, the most common one has fluoride attached to it. And fluoride, they say in the lab, in the test tube, the drug company says, well, that drug's not going to break down and release the fluoride. But in the microbiome, in the intestine, that's the job of bacteria. They break down anything that comes along. So when you take a fluoride type drug, and many of the common drugs, including anesthetics that are used in surgery, have fluoride to help the drug get across the fatty membrane of the cells. So the fluoride running around in the body, it will latch on to magnesium, create a magnesium fluoride compound called phthalate. And it's a brittle compound that binds into tendons and ligaments and joints. So you've got a black box warning by the FDA for ciprofloxacin, a really common antibiotic. Black box warning that it can cause tendon rupture. They don't say why, but because I look at it through the lens of magnesium, that could be the problem. So what else have we got? We've got glucose. In the drug books, allopathic medicine books, under diabetes, they say one of the signs is magnesium deficiency. Nobody talks about that. And, we'll probably get to it, how doctors don't even do blood testing for magnesium. So you've got diabetics who could be benefiting by getting a properly absorbed magnesium that doesn't cause a laxative effect. So, that covers a fair number of things. Were there other specifics you wanted me to get into, Nikkiey?
No, I just, I know that you had the top 12, reasons why magnesium is foundational to women and men's health. So I was just super curious, but you touched on a lot of things there. Muscle, tendons, nerves, pretty much how the whole skeletal muscle kind of works, but also in turn, how they all connect to organs and, the system of which our whole internal operating, mechanics work. So it's pretty interesting. I'm here kind of wanting to unpack a couple of things that you said. First and foremost was one of the things that you said with the cramping. I know so many listeners, and also too, I can resonate with this, getting a muscle spasm or getting a cramp or getting something along those lines after exercise, or even just midway through the day. I've heard people, their feet cramp, their calves cramp. And so, from the world of macronutrients, I'm like, oh, you need to eat a banana. You need to get some potassium in there.
Right. So, well, potassium and magnesium are kissing cousins. They are
Ah.
so close. It's totally, you look up what magnesium does on a certain level, potassium does much the same thing. But it's got to do with the blood testing. They do a good blood test for potassium and they'll find out your levels. But the blood test for magnesium is very inaccurate. They test the serum magnesium, and only 1% of the body's magnesium is in the blood serum. So because magnesium is so vital for the heart function, it's one of the electrolytes that creates the electrical rhythm of the heart. And if there's not enough magnesium, the body will immediately pull magnesium out of the bones and muscles to keep the heart going and maintain this very tight little level. It's of serum magnesium. It's like 3.2 to 4.8, or very tiny, narrow. And what doctors began to say, well, the blood test always looks normal for magnesium, so let's not bother taking it. And as you know, as a former nurse, there is no magnesium on an electrolyte panel. And that is just crazy. What did I say in the beginning? 80% of known metabolic functions require magnesium. I've got scientific references for that.
Why is that? Why isn't magnesium being talked about a little bit more? Like, you're kind of blowing my mind into, because like, I have the background as I shared with you and I've been in the world in the space, but it's not an electrolyte. It's not on a panel. It's not, why isn't it being talked about more?
I think, well, it starts in med school because we learn nothing about vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids in med school. Nothing. Med school is funded by drug companies, and they don't want to even do research on dietary supplements unless it's to put them down. So doctors don't know anything about med school, and med school and residency and specialties. It's so grueling. You figure if you put all that energy into your medical education, you learned everything that you needed to learn. And vitamins and minerals never came up. Okay, they can't be important. It is that cut and dried. It's not until doctors get sick themselves and realize that drugs aren't helping them that they maybe, go into the light. I was different. I went into med school already having read Prevention magazine and every available health book back then. There were like 5. And so I went in, I did not get brainwashed out of my belief. I mean, they almost rejected me from med school because the third year student interview of applicants said that I was a Pollyanna and I thought I could help people. So that, yeah. And anyway, I did get in and I kept being a Pollyanna. And really, Nikki, I thought back then, because of what I knew about nutrition and lifestyle and diet, and Adele Davis, and she was one of the only ones, I thought that within 10, 15 years, all doctors would be taking naturopathic courses and incorporate that. Because even in my med school, our clinical teachers would say to us, well, use a drug for as short a time as possible and then get rid of it because the person's health will be kicking back and they won't need it. But as you know, what's happened in the past 15, 20 years, lifetime drugs. You have to take your cholesterol drug for life. You have to take your blood pressure drug for life. You have to take your diabetes drug for life. And what those 3 drugs do is deplete magnesium and make you sicker and make those conditions worse. Now, I'm not even allowed to say all that and mention my magnesium product name. So I'm not mentioning any product names here because the FDA says, and they told me personally, by the way, Dr. Dean, if you say that your products help disease, then that means you're calling your product a drug, and you have to do the $1 billion drug trial in order to make that claim. So that's why doctors and the public is being kept away from the benefits of good, well absorbed nutrients. And actually the pharmaceutical industry has gotten into the supplement industry too, because you'll see these websites with, oh, here's our top 100 supplements that you absolutely need. And they make people crazy because most of these combination supplements, say for heart, don't even include magnesium. So, these people don't have a clue about what they're formulating. They're just selling widgets to the public.
So circling back to what you said there at the beginning, like answer my question in terms of why, and the fact that in medical school, it's not so much taught about minerals and vitamins blows my mind first and foremost. Second though, is the also medical school, because pairing, like you said at the beginning, like the micronutrients and the macronutrients, doctors undergo either, it depends on where they're educating it from, but like very minimal hours towards nutrition too as well. And both of these two things combined, which blows my mind, the conversation that we're having right now, is that nutrition and eating right and fueling the body and all the processes internally, and then the micronutrients too as well, minerals and vitamins, like literally can be the catalyst together to. So what you're sharing is like the drugs are there to help the symptoms of things rather than getting down to the root causes. And that was something that Dr. Cabral and I talked about on the podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Cabral. He's a functional medicine too as well. And a naturopathic doctor. And we dove deep into this like topic, and it just blows my mind. That stuff blows my mind. So continue to keep being a Pollyanna, because you are being a Pollyanna in this space.
I mean, when you were saying that, I remembered, a conversation I had with my clinical advisor. He was a gastroenterologist at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, Canada. Big guy, overweight, sitting there drinking a Coke and eating a bag of potato chips. And I said to him, well, do you think diet has anything to do? He was a gastroenterologist, has anything to do with gut health? Oh, no, that no way. So boom, I was gone. He was no longer a mentor to me because he didn't have a clue. So there's that aspect. But now there's also the aspect of, you look at nutritional research, and they've gone down the dark side. They're looking at how to make ultra-processed foods more healthy for people. Seriously.
That's why I tell our crew to read the ingredient list. If the ingredient list is a book long, do not put that into your body.
I know. What is that coming from? They might be getting their funding from the food industry to make ultra-processed foods or processed foods look good. They're certainly not getting any funding from organic farmers. Over here in Maui, I run my dietary supplement company, but I also run an organic biodynamic farm because it's all about food. I want to know what people are eating, and I want to know that it's not GMO and it's not fertilized with glyphosates and all that. So I'm looking at it from both sides. And what I know about the nutrition research is that they will never say you have to eat organic and whole foods. They seem to imply all the time that, well, it's too expensive. We have to give people cheap food that's also healthy. And they don't even have clue one, that when you eat ultra-processed foods, you don't get any nutrients, and therefore your body keeps craving foods and keeps wanting to eat. There was a crazy 10-year study that this doctor did, and it was just, I think, on 30 people, and he fed them standard processed foods or ultra-processed foods. And he was amazed that the ultra-processed food people ate 500 calories more a day than the other group. he couldn't figure it out. And in a conference where that was reported, I said, well, that's because they're not getting nutrients and they keep eating. Oh, well, I haven't seen any research that corroborates that. Next question, please. So we cannot depend on the nutrition industry to give us answers. And that's precisely why people depend on folks like you, Nikkiey, to give this information and encouragement and, hand holding. You've got to grip people by both hands to really wake them up that nobody is going to come along, pat you on the head and give you the pill or the diet or eat the diet for you to make you as healthy as you want to be. It's up to us to do that.
Yes, totally. Amen to that. So speaking, I want to come back to like the traditional diagnosis, right? How many of those are being like masks being prescribed or being diagnosed when there's really magnesium deficiencies going on? I want to circle back to that. I want to put a pin there, but I want to bring it to, you mentioned a little bit earlier about energy and how women feel fatigued and how women are tired or men are fatigued. And a big thing with what we talk about here, second to macronutrients, is strength training, right? And I know that you can share a little bit about how magnesium is an essential factor for mitochondria and for energy production, because when it comes to strength training, we look at the mitochondria as like the powerhouse of the cells, right? That are going to give the power to do the strength training. But in order for the mitochondria to be there, it needs to be produced by nutrition. It needs to be like fueled by nutrition. So can you share a little bit about how magnesium, like if it plays an essential factor in that as well?
Well, I think as I already mentioned, magnesium is very active in the mitochondrial cycles, the glycolysis cycle and the Krebs cycle. It's very necessary, but also when you look at the whole lactic acid and lactate balance, magnesium helps that transition back and forth. So if you build up too much lactic acid, magnesium will help to break that down. And as we know, that's probably going into lactate, which is now we're finding out is one of the good guys. And it's a good guy because it's in the Krebs cycle to make energy. So magnesium is just right in the middle of that.
Interesting. So, okay, if it's involved like that, talk to me a little bit about, like, I'm thinking from my experience, I know women have probably experienced it too as well, but I was hospitalized for rhabdomyolysis and I had to get like 7 liters of fluid at that point. And now I know once a woman is diagnosed with rhabdo, like you're more likely to fall back into that state sometimes. But I'm curious because you just spoke to lactic acid there and how like magnesium can play a factor into supporting that.
Well, what's your rhabdo from heavy exercise or something? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was not fun.
No. I mean, that's a muscle cramp that just won't even budge. And rhabdo is a side effect of statins, and statins will block a certain enzyme that magnesium works on. So I don't know if there's a relationship there, but yes, if you can't break down your lactic acid, I mean, you have an acidic chemical in your muscles that triggers especially if you're magnesium deficient, then that would trigger the spasm. Whereas, was
I magnesium deficient at that time?
Yeah,
maybe.
And you wouldn't, yes, and you wouldn't know because they're not going to do the blood test on you. Some of the university research that I'm doing now, it's all based on using ionized magnesium testing. And that gives us an idea of the actual ion of magnesium that's in your blood that is available to go into your cells. Because your cells don't need a magnesium compound. And what's happening now in sort of the magnesium commercial world is, oh, well, we've made this magnesium supplement that has 12 different magnesium compounds. It's really going to do the job for you. Well, you don't want the compound because what you'll get, say, with 500 milligrams of a magnesium glycinate is 50 to 75 milligrams of magnesium. The rest of it is glycine. If you're trying to treat magnesium deficiency, you want magnesium. You don't want the glycine. The glycine may do some things for you, but if you're listening to what I'm saying, that 80% of your no metabolic functions require magnesium, then that's the deficiency you want to treat. You've got this magnesium L-threonate, which they say, oh, it's the only one that gets into your brain. There's a huge book online at the University of Auckland in New Zealand called Magnesium and the Central Nervous System. And it was written way before magnesium L-threonate came around. And it's all about the central nervous system being supported by magnesium. Many of the studies were done with magnesium oxide, which is 4% absorbed. And as long as there's a little bit of that magnesium that ionizes out, it'll get into the brain. All magnesium studies are positive. But what I've gotten to with the way I finally had to do a magnesium product on my own was create a stabilized ion of magnesium that rides around in the blood as an ion, jumps into the cells. It won't get bound back up to another substance because magnesium is very reactive. So in the blood, if you have the magnesium glycinate, it can separate for a split second. There's this ion of magnesium. It could go into a cell in that split second. But in the next split second, it joins back up to the glycine or something else because it's so reactive. So you don't want a magnesium compound. You want a stabilized ion of magnesium. I call it a picometer magnesium. So you see what I'm getting at? It's if you're treating magnesium deficiency, you want a magnesium ion, not a magnesium compound. And, because it's all just, there's no medical backup for magnesium. Well, I shouldn't say that, Nikki, because if you go into PubMed and just type in magnesium, there'll be a couple 100,000 articles, studies, clinical research, animal and human, but it's not translating into clinical application because people don't understand what the body really needs.
Interesting. That's pretty, thank you for sharing all of that. So, because and I'm thinking back in my brain, if you have a deficiency, you want to treat it full on with magnesium. I use magnesium for sleep. So I use magnesium glycinate for sleep. And would you recommend that to if people have maybe if someone has high cortisol or they're trying to get into their cortisol spikes at night and they're trying to unwind, would you recommend magnesium for sleep? Hey, just want to drop a huge appreciation to you guys listening to the show. It means a lot. I hope you guys are enjoying it and there's so much more to come with it. If you are enjoying it, hit the subscribe button. I'd appreciate that tons. And also, it would help this podcast reach others who need to hear these messages too. Thanks so much, guys. Let's get back to the show.
Any magnesium will have a positive effect. So I'll recommend any magnesium, not one over the other, except mine, of course, which is fully absorbed. But I think the people that come to me, I've got over 100,000 customers, and I think they approach me because I'm a medical doctor and a naturopath, and they come with the most horrendous stories of illnesses and being on 10 to 20 drugs, and they really want to know what to do with their health and, to slowly build up magnesium and then watch as they're able to diminish their drug intake is just incredible. So it's a different world, but, I'm reaching people probably in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm in my 70s. So, people in my age group, and
you fooled me there. I had no idea.
You
look so good.
Thank you. Well, that's because I take my simple remedies. I have, a few others as well. But anyway, I really love speaking to the younger audience, because if we can get you on your basic micronutrients as well as your macronutrients early, you will not end up at, knocking on my door in your 60s and 70s with atrial fibrillation, high cholesterol, even heart failure, arthritis. In this book and my previous book, I started doing it. I've got over 67 conditions that can be mistaken magnesium deficiency conditions. 65. And that's crazy, but it's true.
That is so crazy. So, okay, you mentioned this a few there, but for listeners and also, selfishly for myself, how can someone determine if they have a magnesium deficiency?
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, about 80% of the population is likely magnesium deficient. Second, magnesium is the safest dietary supplement you can take. If you take, quote, too much, you'll get the laxative effect. Now, in my case, I could not take more than 50 milligrams of magnesium without getting the laxative effect. So that's what got me on, I had to save myself. That's what got me on to trying to find a non-laxative. When I found my non-laxative magnesium, I was able to take 1,200 milligrams without the laxative effect. And then over a year and a half, and I appreciate what you say, Nikkiey, about, if you want to tone your body, you've got to give yourself, 1 to 3 years. We cannot offer people, weekend miracles. So at the end of, year and a half, I could cut back. And presently I'm only on 450 milligrams a day. If I take more, I could get the laxative effect. But if I'm eating a lot of dairy, or I'm under more stress, or start doing more exercise, I will need more magnesium. Now, in terms of how do you know if you need it, I think on one of my websites, I should have a magnesium deficiency questionnaire. And it's simple things like, do you get leg cramps? Do you have heart palpitations? Do you have insomnia? Do you get headaches? It's really simple questions. And actually, as a sidebar, a lot of people, when they start taking medications, they'll start getting magnesium deficiency symptoms because the drug is using up their magnesium to detoxify it. So I just say to people, just start taking some magnesium and see how you feel. Really get used to how your body feels and what it needs. And that's what you do with your clients as well.
Yeah. And just normal magnesium. So not the compound, the regular magnesium.
Well, there are only compounds available. The only one that's a stabilized ion is my formula.
And you can't share that on here, or I guess you mentioned that earlier, or can you?
I can't give the name, but you'll give people my website and they can research it.
Okay. Sounds good. So with all the people that you help, and that you've said that you had tons and tons of people, are there certainly populations that you notice are more at risk for magnesium deficiency, or is it just that like 80% of the world is just magnesium deficient?
I'd say athletes are really susceptible because they sweat out their minerals. And that is so scary when you think of an athlete who really wants to be healthy and train hard. And I mean, here in Maui, I'm doing my 2-hour walk. I swim, I stretch. I should do even more. You have to keep at, I do only a 3-pound weight when I walk. You have to do all that to keep your body, because we're in a situation now where we're sitting down all the time. We're not like 100 years ago where we were out and using our bodies. So we have to mimic that. But anyway, where were we?
I was just questioning about like what are the population of which maybe there's more youth athletes. Yeah.
I think I twigged onto that years ago when a veterinarian who was using magnesium for his animals, one day he said something like, veterans, especially in the Middle East where they sweat buckets, they will take off their undershirt at the end of the day, wring out the sweat, hang it up, and it will dry hard with all the minerals. And then they pound it out and then they wash it. So, one of the horrible things about veterans is they come back with PTSD. They've been given a lot of shots as well with, perhaps mercury in them. They've been exposed to all kinds of horrible gases and things in their training and in the Middle East. So they've got a lot of reasons to be toxic, but I think part of it is mineral deficiencies.
Interesting. Okay, so a couple more questions were popping into my brain as you were just talking there. You mentioned earlier that your specific magnesium can be fully absorbed. How about how can one maximize absorption of magnesium just maybe through food?
Well, yeah, the research I've seen on that is the U.S. Department of Agriculture said that 100 years ago we were getting 500 milligrams of magnesium in our ordinary daily diet. Now we're lucky to get 200 milligrams, and we need 600. Oh, it's farmed out. We have such high tech, mega farming that doesn't replace the magnesium. They'll just put down potash and nitrogen, phosphorus to make the plants look good. But there's no label on fresh produce to say what minerals are in there. So the minerals are very deficient. And even in my farm here, when I tried to eat just farm, now I'll never be able to be a vegan or a vegetarian. I tried that. I tried to do even just a macrobiotic diet many years ago. I'm the original biohacker, Nikkiey. Right? I've been biohacking longer than most of you have been alive.
Before it was even cool, Carolyn.
Exactly. So when I did macro, you have to do macro. I tried everything. Within a few weeks, I had phlegm on my lungs. I had to put my stethoscope on and I felt okay, but I had phlegm on my lungs. So I ate some organic chicken, and within the day, the phlegm was, diminishing because I didn't have enough protein to take up the albumin or whatever that was building up in my lungs. So some people can't be vegan and vegetarian, and it drives me crazy that less than 5% of the American population is vegan or vegetarian, yet they make us all think that, we're criminals because we're not vegan vegetarian, whereas most people really need the protein and they can't do without it.
Amen to that. I know there's so many women that come into our community and they start WarriorBabe and they're eating 60 grams of protein a day. And we're like, oh my goodness. It's just from not knowing, and they're here to learn and educate that how important protein is. Okay. So I want to circle back to those. You mentioned 65 traditional diagnoses very well could be disguised they could be being diagnosed with this, but really they have magnesium deficiency.
Right.
What
I know.
You mentioned high cortisol, you mentioned MS, you mentioned heart palpitations, you mentioned a couple there. And I'm just blown away that, those things are being disguised. So when really magnesium is just really the deficiency happening here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have the list here, the acid reflux. Oh. Now, what happens there is if you're, if at the, the bottom of your esophagus, the top of your stomach, the diaphragm is separating them. If the diaphragm is in spasm, then it can kind of open up that gastroesophageal opening, and you can have reflex heartburn. If you take magnesium, the diaphragm no longer spasms. So there's acid reflux, there's adrenal fatigue, which allopathic medicine says doesn't even exist, but we're all just, we're in a constant state of PTSD. I mean, we've been living in shock for the past 3-4 years with what the craziness that happened to us all, which we will not even name. So adrenal fatigue, Alzheimer's disease. You get Alzheimer's from maybe mercury in the brain, aluminum in the brain, the calcium in the brain, and magnesium detoxes. What I've seen that will be important to women is after about 2-3 months of taking just my magnesium and getting that going, the immune system will kick in to the point that the body will start getting rid of yeast overgrowth. And that, I mean, seriously, Nikki, the two things that I work with are magnesium deficiency, which nobody recognizes, and yeast overgrowth, which everybody ignores. And I think they're both so important because of antibiotics, birth control pill, stress cortisol, and sugar in the diet. Our large intestinal yeast grows up into the small intestine, creating a leaky gut and all the irritation of the gut. And then 78 different yeast toxins are absorbed into the body, causing everything from brain fog to joint pain because the toxins get into the joints. Yeast toxins will block thyroid hormone production. In Alzheimer's, when you take a well-absorbed magnesium, you start dumping heavy metals. Seriously. Heavy metals will try to take up kind of receptor sites or storage sites that magnesium uses. So if you have enough magnesium in those storage sites, then the heavy metals just don't attach. And that is huge. You've got angina. The heart is one big muscle. And what we said in the beginning about the muscle spasms that are caused by magnesium deficiency, the heart goes into a spasm and causes angina and heart attacks. You take these athletes that have sudden cardiac arrest. I mean, besides other causes, we have magnesium deficiency. So we've got anxiety and panic attacks. And that relates as well to the adrenal glands. You've got people who, their throat will sort of clutch up and they'll, start panicking. You give them a magnesium drink and it relaxes them. I describe all these, arthritis, asthma. I mean, when you look at as a former nurse, that asthma is treated with corticosteroids, over and over and over again. But the smooth muscle lining of the bronchial tubes can go into spasm and clutch up the bronchial tubes and cause wheezing. You take magnesium and your bronchial tubes open up. Just like that. You've got atherosclerosis. Okay, here, I mean, they talk about atherosclerosis, the cause of blood pressure and maybe heart attacks, where cholesterol jams up your arteries and causes blockage. Well, what happens in my scenario? Two things. Nitric oxide is deficient because of lack of magnesium. Nitric oxide helps dilate blood vessels. Without it, your blood vessels kind of collapse. And second, when you have a vitamin C deficiency, you don't make the proper amount of collagen. And collagen is really necessary to make all the soft tissue structures in the body, even the bone. So if you've got a blood vessel bifurcation, so you've got, two big blood vessels coming down and they come to a Y, and then they make a tinier blood vessel. That's a stretch point that can be weakened with collagen deficiency, and it can split a little bit. Into that split, cholesterol will put itself on there like a piece of gum, Band-Aid, to try to heal the area. And if you have a lot of calcium in your blood, because magnesium and calcium are their enemies. If you have a lot of calcium, it bumps out magnesium. But if you have much more magnesium, you will drive calcium into the bones and teeth where it belongs. Magnesium does that, and vitamin K2 does that. But in your blood vessels, if you have too much calcium, it'll just jam onto that cholesterol and cause the atherosclerotic plaque, which will be blamed on cholesterol and not calcium and vitamin C deficiency. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of good stuff. Definitely a lot of education being shared here, and I appreciate it. That book, everybody needs to go pick up that book and read about magnesium, which I'll link all of your links in the description below this podcast. One more question that I'm curious, because you kind of just talked about it there, which was super interesting with calcium and magnesium. What's the importance of magnesium as like a partner? You mentioned it earlier too, but that was a partner towards potassium, or like a kissing partner. I forget how you said it, but what's the importance of magnesium as like a partner with other essential vitamins, like vitamin D, like calcium?
Yeah, those are the main ones. They say for magnesium compound, maybe vitamin D6 is helpful for absorption. But what's fun to look at, and maybe you've done it, there's something called a mineral wheel. So it's a big round wheel with a few dozen minerals around the outside. And then they have lines that join up or don't join up with other minerals. So you can see what interacts with magnesium on that. And that brings me to say the following, that there are so many minerals that we really don't even talk about. And that's why when I recommend a program to people, I start with hydration. And I hydrate people with purified water of some sort, but sea salt in the water. So you take your body weight in pounds, divide that in half, and that half amount is the number of ounces of water you drink a day. And in each liter of water, you put at least a quarter teaspoon of a good sea salt. And a good sea salt means a sea salt that has some color to it. Because if it's a white sea salt, it means it's been refined and the minerals have been removed. So you do your water, and then in my protocols, I get people taking my magnesium and my multiple mineral and maybe my silver in that water, along with a vitamin C powder that has a berry flavor so that the taste of the minerals don't choke you. But the multiple mineral you would love, because it's 12 minerals, 9 of which support thyroid hormone production. Thyroid hormones are killed by yeast toxins and pregnancy. If you've had even one pregnancy, your thyroid, I don't think the thyroid hormones have been drained, but it's like your minerals have been drained. And you're not making your thyroid hormone properly. And, the postpartum depression business, can be related to low thyroid as well as low zinc. And the fact you're not getting any sleep.
Wow. So one question there, that as you were talking about that water, would you recommend that water to people that are like strength training and working out and highly active, where you take the ounces, or you take your body weight divided by 2, you said, and that's how many ounces you should be having a day?
Right, that's right. Well, you would need more if you're sweating. You really do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your kind of your baseline minimum. But you look at sauna therapy. People sit in the sauna and sweat. They sweat a lot. You have to replace that with sea salt water. I've had people come to me who've done sauna therapies and they feel worse because they haven't been given mineral replacement. Yeah. It's the same with, heat shock or cold shock treatments. They make people feel good because they're making your body think that it's dying, and it puts out all these, growth hormone and adrenaline, and all these things come out, and they're measured, and oh my gosh, look at all these good things that are happening when we try to kill our body. And you may feel good for a while, but then you will tank if you're not replacing your minerals.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just was curious about that because I know I love to tell our community, like, drink the water. Like, they need to drink water, and a heck of I recommend getting at least like around 100 or up to at least 120 ounces, depending on the person. But I know that that's important because of what in our world we do a lot of exercise and strength training and building skeletal muscle. So I just need that verification or that clarification there. Cool. Amazing stuff here. There's a lot of things that we covered and talked about, and
I know.
Yeah, interesting stuff to the world of magnesium. So I appreciate you and your time and sharing your knowledge here on this podcast. And everybody that's listening, you guys can go check out. I'm going to go search your website and try and find, your magnesium. And anybody that's listening that wants to follow Dr. Carolyn Dean, all the links will be below this podcast, and you guys can get links to her books and everything too as well. So thank you again for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nikki. It was fun. It went, like a flash.
I know, right? 55 minutes recording, hanging out. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. So I appreciate what you're doing for your community. It is so important, that we marry the kissing cousins of macro and micro.
Heck yeah. Macronutrients and micronutrients. Very important, people. Don't forget about the micros. Well, thank you, Dr. Carolyn Dean. I appreciate your time being here. Hey guys, real quick. If you're interested in taking your body to the next level, lose body fat, build more muscle, feel more confident, do it alongside one of our 30+ professional coaches. Work one-on-one with her to eliminate all of the guesswork that you may have, and all you need to do is just do the work that she tells you to do to get to those goals of yours. Now, to learn more, click the link below this podcast and apply to our VIP program right now.